All right, so I'm out in the back. I've got my equipment, my chainsaw, my safety gear, which I'm going to put on here for a minute. It's super important to wear chainsaw pants. They're only about 50 bucks on Amazon, easy enough to get. And the helmet with the Ear Pro and face shield is also super cheap, maybe about 30, 35 bucks. I'll put a link to it in Amazon on the bottom. Super important. You can't get your leg back, but you can basically easily buy another pair of chainsaw pants if you mess them up by hitting it with the blade. I also want to mention, besides the chainsaw mill here, I also have a ripping chain installed on there, which is, a normal chain on a chainsaw is about a 30-degree angle for the cut, and a chainsaw ripping chain used for milling is a 10-degree angle on the cut, and it's just better for cutting down the length of a log. It's going to give you a more, it's going to give you a better cut, basically, is what I'm trying to say here. I was originally going to mill this log in place where it is right now, so I'm clearing out all of the sticks and twigs around it, but I decided once I measured up the log, and because I've never done chainsaw milling before, it would probably be best to move this to a new location. So what I'm doing right now is I'm clearing off any bumps or twigs or branches that are sticking out of the log, because the first cut is the most important. You want to make sure it's completely clear. So you go up and down the length of the log, get rid of anything that the chainsaw might get snagged on or might end up messing up the cut once you get started. I'm using a 5-inch draw knife here to do that, which is good for the task, but I think a bigger, maybe an 8 or a 10-inch draw knife would probably be better for this task. So after clearing up all the sticks and bumps off the log, I'm just running the draw knife down the length of it to get a nice flat surface to start my milling with. So I decided, as you can see, to move the log out onto the trail and put it up on two logs. I actually rotated it to a surface that was flatter, because this one kind of has a bow in the center of it. So now it's up on the log. It is flat. The top of it has been cleared off, and I'm starting my first cut of the chainsaw milling. So I learned a lot of things through this process, and there are many things I did not do right, and I guess that's how you learn, basically, and that's why I did start with this log. So first of all, it's very important to have a rail on the top. I thought this log was pretty straight and it wasn't going to cause me any issue, so I didn't install a rail for the first cut. Basically, that would make it, the rail would make it so that that first cut you did was completely straight. You'd level that, and then the top of your chainsaw mill would run across the rail. And I don't actually have a rail, but I definitely intend to get one, because now that I've finished milling up this whole board, you can see at the end of this cut here, it kind of dips down a bit, which for the rest of the cuts of the milling process, it did the same thing, and I'm going to have to cut off the ends of those boards. And I was pretty lucky with this board because it was straight, but there is still a little bit of variation, so it would have been better had I set up the rail here. Now the first cut is completed. I have a pretty flat surface. Yeah, look at that, checking it out, eyeing it up. For my second cut, so if you had used a rail, which I really recommend and I will be using in the future, you only really need to use it for your first cut, because now you've got a flat surface to build off of for the remainder of the cuts. So this cut would be my first piece of usable lumber, and it turned out pretty great. But as I mentioned before, you can see there at the very end of the log, far end from where I am now, the cut kind of dips down a bit, so that area is not necessarily very usable, which could have been remediated had I used that rail on top. So yeah, that's the basic process. I just repeated this step 2 times after this so that I could get 4 good boards, including that first end piece you see over there. The camera died in the middle of this cut, so I don't have the full milling process. But yeah, basically, I'm kind of figuring it out here. So you see a lot of wiggling, but the blade should pull itself along and you shouldn't have to push it, which I'm doing a little bit of here. Okay, and here you have it. The final product is 4 very usable boards and 1 bottom cut, which I actually might go back in the future and try to get another board out of that, maybe an inch thickness. Yeah, it's a little hard to tell from this, but the boards are straight. This is just kind of a strange angle, and the boards themselves kind of bow to the left or right, depending on how you're looking at it there in the middle. You can see at the end, closest to the camera, the boards kind of bow down a little bit, and that's what I was talking about earlier, where I didn't have the rail system to start, so when I took it off at the end of the board, it kind of bowed down a little bit, so I'll have to cut that end off for me to be able to use these boards efficiently. Hey everybody, so you just watched me chainsaw about a 12-inch diameter pine tree out back. That's the first time I've ever used this chainsaw mill or chainsaw milled in general. I probably have a lot to learn still before I do it correctly, but I wanted to give everybody some insight into some beginner chainsaw milling, I guess. So this is the mill. I bought it off of Amazon. I'll put the link down in the description below, but it was about $100, which if you know anything about live edge, I probably already have made the money back or close to it with that one tree that I milled. You can get if you know a good place, you can get some pine live edge for about $35 a board, but it can be a lot more expensive than that, and this thing's going to last hopefully for years, so I'll definitely get my money back and then some on this. Okay, so basically what you do when you first set it up is you lock your chain into the base here and into the chain guard here, and then there's 2 gauges right here where you can set your depth, so how thick you want your piece to be that you're milling. The milling that I did today, I had an 1.5 inch thickness, which is a pretty standard thickness for live edge stuff. You want it to be a little bit thicker than a regular construction grade lumber, which is usually like a 3/4 an inch thick or 1/2 inch thick, or up to potentially 1 inch thick. But this is a little bit thicker because it's live edge. So yeah, what I'm doing now is I'm just going to take this mill off the chainsaw and put everything away so I can use it again next time. Right. And I'm wearing gloves now because it's pretty messy. I had to refuel this with oil about 4 times, once per cut that I did. It uses a lot of oil. I know some people, I've seen videos of people using like a auxiliary oiler, where they basically just clamp on some sort of a jar onto here with a little crimped tubing that goes right down to the blade and just slowly drips oil on that. And for that you don't have to use bar and chain oil for that. I think you can use anything, even vegetable oil works for that, but I haven't personally tried that myself yet. Loosen up these 4 bolts, 2 in the front here, and 2 in the back to be able to get the blade free. So this chainsaw's pretty nice. It was made pretty great. There's the reviews on Amazon all talk about it having a missing nut or 2 nuts or something, and I actually had that same problem, so I had to go to Home Depot and get 2 5/16 nuts, I think, for the bottom. So if you do decide to get this, you might have to go through the same process of buying those extra nuts, because it seems to be a habitual problem with these Chinese manufacturers. I don't know what I'm going to use that milled lumber for yet. I don't have a project in mind. I just finished building a live edge bench for the bunk room. So I'm kind of out of live edge projects right now, but I am more than positive I'll come up with something in the next couple of weeks to use it for. And as you saw in the video, it's outside drying now, so I just kind of stacked it up with little spaces in between so the air can get between each and it can dry evenly. I had taken some chips, which is like a chip, I guess, is like an end cut around from the log, which I have right here. I cut these a couple of weeks ago and had them in here to dry, and there's a little bit of mold around the outside, which can happen, obviously, because there's mold spores already in the wood before you even did anything to it. So I had those drying in here just to see how the wood quality was. That tree fell down not the beginning of this past winter, so about maybe 14 months ago, maybe 12 months ago, somewhere in that range, it fell down. And I had cut it up mostly for firewood earlier in the year, but I saved a good 8-ish section piece of it. You can hear Owen upstairs, so that I could mill that up. So I had been waiting out there for a couple of months now for me to get to that project. Yeah, this is kind of more tedious and painstaking than I wished that it was, but it's important when you start, before you mill, that you measure all your distances. So I had seen some complaints about these actually not matching up very well with each other, but I have it on 1.5 inches on both of these, and I measured to the table here, and then the distance from the saw up and the cuts itself, and I got really good measurements. I didn't really have to do anything to modify it once I put it on. There are plenty of things I didn't do correctly, but that's why I started with a pine board. I've got some nicer stuff I want to mill out there, but I thought this was a good start. Yeah, once you get that off, you kind of want to start to clean up some of this. This is like coated in oil. I'm probably going to go back and do a very, very thorough cleaning over the wintertime to kind of get all the extra stuff off, but this will be good for now. Hopefully some of this crap will dry on here. I can get it off easier next time. Everything was wet. It's been raining the last couple of days. The mucky area back there had a huge puddle of water, and it hasn't had that since the spring thaw, so that's goes to show how wet it actually has been. Looks like the chain loosened up a little bit. So yeah, I think I milled 3 really good usable boards, 4 with the top, 5 total with the top and bottom. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts that I did. I had to fill it with oil every time I did a cut, and I had to fill it with gas every time I did a cut. So you'd be surprised how much you can actually go through when you're out there milling. You use up your oil and your gas pretty quickly, and your arm strength for that matter. It wasn't the easiest thing to do. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, cheers.